So how might we think about the changing balance in the military balance in the Western Pacific and from a U.S. perspective? Certainly, it's in the U.S. interest to want to shore up its military position in the Western Pacific, given that capability really is the foundation for our alliance and security relationships, and those in turn are the foundation for our economic relationships and going beyond really for globalization itself. Our goals here are not to prompt an arms race. It's not to trigger a conflict with China, but it is to signal our resolve and our seriousness, and to hold out the credible prospect of denying the PLA any sort of quick victory, whether it be in a cross-strait scenario or in another territorial dispute around its periphery. With this in mind, I'll put in a shameless plug for Air-Sea Battle. This is a report that the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments has written over the last few months, and it was publicly released last week. What I thought I'd do is just touch on some of the key tenets there, which really kind of get at some of the implications for the United States and how we might think about redressing the balance. The first is really building on the point Mark here has emphasized in terms of the PLA's buildup of missile forces that can hold at risk U.S. forward land bases in the Western Pacific, as well as large naval surface combatants. And here, the first line of operation that we really see, and this is one that has to begin really now in advance of a continuing competition over the next several decades, is taking steps to withstand initial attack and to avoid any sort of assassin's mace death blow, which leads to a political diplomatic fait accompli before the U.S. really can respond in an effective manner militarily. Efforts in this regard that are very important, not only the hardening of those bases and the development and the practice of capabilities like rapid runway repair, but the hardening of the war-related material and petroleum, oil, and lubricants and precision-guided munition stocks that attend those bases. If you look at what the PLA is doing already, they bury their fuel, they bury their munitions, and they take other steps to increase the survivability of their bases. We're going to need to do much the same. But beyond just the hardening of the bases we have, we really have to think about the diversification of our bases in the Western Pacific. That again, this complicates planning for our opponent in terms of the number of bases that have to be held at risk, and it may enable other elements of a concept that I'll come to in a moment. Another part of the defense of the bases, in addition to some of the passive defense steps you can take, are the active defenses, and particularly your air and your missile defenses. And here we see a very important role to be played in terms of sea-based missile defenses that can project defenses ashore and provide coverage, and also coverage that's maneuverable. Additionally, as we look ahead, it appears, given some of the recent strides that we've made, particularly in terms of solid-state directed energy systems, that directed energy may in fact be a useful complement to more kinetic missile defense interceptors. They'll probably never, just given weather constraints and other problems, be a silver bullet solution, but they may be a useful complement in terms of our overall missile defense arsenal. And unlike our kinetic interceptors, they may have almost a virtually unlimited magazine. The second line of operation really comes back to this asymmetry in terms of the types of strike systems that we have. Are they more standoff, or are they more penetrating? And here, what we really see is the Achilles heel of a standoff force, which is predominantly composed of ballistic and cruise missiles, is the targeting plots. If you can deny your opponent an ability to effectively locate and target your forces, you essentially can negate the effectiveness of a larger and more superior missile force. And you can say, well, that sounds great if I'm a naval maneuver force, but if I'm a fixed base, there's really no way for me to change my latitude, my longitude. I'm kind of stuck in location. And this, again, is where it really emphasizes the power of combinations, that what we'd like to be able to do if we've diversified our bases, it can enable us with our land-based air forces to essentially play a shell game. And it's very difficult to target as we are able to bounce those forces around. It's very difficult for the adversary then if we have taken steps to deny their effective use of their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems, whether they be space-based, air-based, or ground-based over-the-horizon radars and other capabilities. If you can deny their effective use, you're able to buy back some maneuver, either playing a shell game with your land bases or being able to maneuver your naval forces. For your naval forces, it's going to be incredibly important to have longer-range carrier aviation assets. They're stealthy. They're capable of penetrating into an anti-access environment, not only to provide early ISR and strike, but to enable other elements of the joint force to come to bear by conducting missions such as suppression of enemy air defenses to enable longer-range, perhaps land-based and higher volume strikes to penetrate into that airspace. This really gets to the third line of operation, which has to do with suppressing enemy missile forces. And here, just given the huge number of missiles and launchers that we might face, it really demands a ruthless prioritization. And here what we see is that in addition to the steps that we would take in a blinding campaign to deny the enemy the effective use of its ISR systems and the ability to target our forces, we would need to hold at risk the longest range missile systems that the PLA may have and focus our efforts on suppressing those fires. In particular, suppressing anti-ship ballistic missile forces, which would help us to buy back naval maneuver and move closer within range to increase sortie generation and the ability to perform strikes. The fourth line of operation is really about regaining the initiative. And if early on, if the point of air-sea battle is to not lose a war, now it provides an opportunity to shift and actually think about how you might end it on terms that are advantageous and favorable. Regaining the initiative is absolutely critical, and the ability to keep, in particular, the PLA Navy and its Air Force bottled up within the first island chain, and then to roll back that threat through a combination of our undersea fleet, which is able to penetrate into that environment from the earliest stages of a conflict, as well as we've rolled back some of the anti-ship ballistic missile and anti-ship cruise missile threats, the ability to maneuver naval forces closer towards the east coast of Asia. And then it's really preparing for follow-on operations. That what we see is that the ability of the United States and its allies to hold out the credible prospect of being able to not only withstand early attacks, but to stay in the game in a protracted war has large deterrent potential that we need to demonstrate. And when I say we, it's really the United States and all of its allies and partners, that we're in it for the long haul, and that we really want to completely take off the table any prospect of any sort of knockout blow and fait accompli. And we think over time that a prolonged conflict potentially plays to some U.S. advantages. The fact that we have lines of communication through the Atlantic Ocean, that we may be able to impose a distant blockade that would cut both access to and from overseas markets for the opponent. But as part of this, one of the issues that we have is that we really have to think about our industrial production. What does it mean in a conflict which is conducted